As the assembly dispersed, buzzing with excitement over the impending duel, Logan found himself surrounded by his fellow Earth diplomats. Their faces were a mix of concern and disbelief, as the reality of the situation began to settle in. "Logan, what were you thinking?" hissed Sarah Chen, his senior colleague, her voice laced with disbelief. "We're here to negotiate peace, not fight alien duels." Logan ran a hand through his hair, the weight of his actions settling heavily on his shoulders. He hadn't expected to find himself in such a predicament, but once the challenge had been issued, refusing would have cost them everything. "I know, Sarah, I know. But what choice did I have? If I'd refused, we'd have lost all credibility before negotiations even began. And now?" Sarah's voice was tight with worry, her concern mirrored by the other diplomats around them. "You think getting beaten to a pulp by a Saren warrior is going to help our cause?" Logan's jaw set with determination. "Who says I'm going to lose?" Meanwhile, across the arena, Ilia found herself cornered by her own people. The tall Saren, who had initially confronted Logan, stepped close, his voice low and urgent. "Ambassador Ilia, you can't seriously consider this farce," he growled. "That human made a mockery of our traditions. We should demand his immediate removal from the summit." Ilia's eyes flashed dangerously, her expression hardening. "And what would that accomplish, Zarin? Besides confirming every negative stereotype about our people? No, this is an opportunity. If the human survives the trial, it will elevate both our races in the eyes of the galaxy." Zarin scoffed. "If he survives. He's a diplomat, not a warrior. This will be over in seconds." A small smile tugged at the corners of Ilia's mouth. "Perhaps. But there's something about this Logan Kane. I suspect he may surprise us all." As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the grand arena attached to the summit complex began to fill with eager spectators. Delegates from across the galaxy jostled for position, eager to witness this unexpected spectacle. Logan stood at one end of the arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The night before had been spent in frantic preparation, as he tried to recall what little he knew about Saren combat techniques, and brushing up on long-forgotten lessons from his brief military training years ago. Across the arena, Ilia emerged, her blue skin gleaming in the early morning light. She wore a form-fitting suit made of liquid metal, which rippled with every movement she made. In her hand, she wielded a staff that crackled with energy, a weapon that seemed alive in her grasp. Logan couldn't help but admire her grace and power as she moved across the arena toward him. She was a predator, every step calculated, every movement precise. "I hope you rested well, Ambassador Ilia," Logan said, trying to remain calm as they faced each other. "You'll need all your strength for what's to come." Ilia's eyes narrowed slightly, a small smirk on her lips. "I appreciate your concern. I just hope I can provide you with a worthy challenge." The gong sounded, signaling the start of the duel. Ilia wasted no time. She lunged forward with blinding speed, her staff whirling through the air. It crackled with energy as it descended towards Logan's head. Logan barely managed to dodge, the heat from the weapon grazing his skin as it passed inches from his face. He stumbled backward, desperately trying to create some distance between them. Ilia pressed her advantage, her attacks a blur of motion. Logan found himself on the defensive, ducking and weaving, barely avoiding each strike. The crowd roared with excitement, many already certain of the outcome. Logan's mind raced. He couldn't match Ilia's strength or speed, he knew that much, but maybe he didn't have to. A plan began to form in his mind, born of desperation and the diplomatic skills he had honed over the years of negotiating with people far more dangerous than any Saren warrior. "Dodging and evading won't win this," he muttered to himself as he narrowly avoided another crushing blow. "Think." Then, as if by instinct, Logan called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Tell me, Ambassador Ilia, what does this duel mean to your people?" Ilia paused, momentarily caught off guard by the question. "It is a test of worth," she replied, circling him warily, her eyes tracking every movement. A way to prove one's strength and honor. Logan nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. And if I were to defeat you, what would that mean for Earth standing in the galaxy? A murmur ran through the crowd. Ilia's eyes narrowed, her calculating mind already weighing the implications of his words. It would elevate your people greatly in the eyes of many, she admitted, though she didn't look convinced. But such an outcome is unlikely. Logan smiled, his confidence growing as the idea took shape in his mind. Then let's make this interesting. I propose a wager. Ilia lowered her staff slightly, intrigued despite herself. A wager? What kind of wager? If you defeat me, Logan began, his voice carrying across the arena, Earth will concede to Saren leadership on the issue of resource allocation in the Outer Rim. A collective gasp rose from the Earth delegation, and Ilia's eyes widened. The Outer Rim dispute had been a major point of contention between their peoples, and Logan had just offered to concede a significant amount of power. And if by some miracle you were to win, Logan continued, his gaze steady, then Saren agrees to joint exploration and equal resource sharing in the region. The arena erupted into a buzz of excited conversation. Ilia studied Logan for a moment, and Logan could see the wheels turning in her mind. A new respect entered her eyes. You're either very brave, or very foolish, Ambassador Kane, she said, her voice a mix of admiration and challenge. But I accept your terms. With that, she lunged forward again, her attacks faster, more furious than before. Logan, however, had found a second wind. He may not have been able to match Ilia's raw power, but years of diplomatic negotiations had honed his ability to read people, perhaps even alien warriors. As Ilia's staff came down in a fierce arc, Logan anticipated the movement, using her momentum against her. When she struck high, he ducked low, forcing her off balance. When she swept low, he leapt, using the staff's energy field to propel himself higher than a human had any right to go. The crowd gasped in amazement as Logan, the Earth diplomat, held his own against the Saren warrior. His unorthodox style, a mix of evasion, redirection, and the occasional surprising counterattack, kept Ilia off balance. As the duel wore on, Logan could see the frustration building in Ilia's eyes. She had expected an easy victory, but this had become a drawn-out contest. In her growing anger, Ilia's attacks became more aggressive, but also more predictable. Logan saw his opportunity. As Ilia lunged forward with a powerful thrust, he sidestepped at the last moment, grabbing her staff. With a twist of his body and a surge of strength, he used her own momentum to flip her over his shoulder. Ilia hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. In an instant, Logan was on her, pinning her down with her own staff across her throat. The arena fell silent, the audience holding their collective breath. As the silence of the arena stretched, Logan's voice broke through, hoarse from exertion, "Do you yield?" His words echoed in the tense stillness, carrying across the hushed crowd. Ilia's eyes locked onto his, a mixture of shock, grudging respect, and the weight of defeat in her gaze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The entire arena seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her answer. Then, slowly, her expression softened. With a deep sigh, she nodded. "I yield," she said, her voice carrying with an almost regal calm. The words hung in the air for a brief moment before, in an instant, the silence shattered. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound deafening in its intensity. Delegates from various worlds surged forward, eager to congratulate the Earth diplomat who had just overcome what seemed an impossible challenge. Logan stood in the center of the arena, breathing heavily but filled with a sense of accomplishment. As Ilia rose to her feet, she gripped his arm firmly, her eyes shining with a blend of admiration and something more. "Well fought, Ambassador Kane," she said, her voice sincere. "It seems there is more to you humans than meets the eye." Before Logan could respond, the ground trembled beneath them. A deafening explosion rocked the arena, shaking the very walls of the complex. Thick plumes of smoke poured from the eastern entrance, and the first of the armored figures appeared, weapons blazing. Panic erupted as delegates screamed and scrambled for cover. The peaceful atmosphere of the summit dissolved into chaos. "We're under attack!" Ilia shouted, pushing Logan down as an energy bolt whizzed past his head, sizzling with power. Logan's heart raced, his mind scrambling to process the sudden shift from diplomatic negotiations to full-blown conflict. "Who are they?" Logan yelled, his voice barely audible over the chaos of battle. The air was thick with the sounds of blasters, shouts, and the desperate scrambling of frightened delegates. Ilia's face darkened. "The Crimson Dawn," she spat, her voice filled with disgust. "A militant faction opposed to galactic unity. They must be here to disrupt the summit." As if to confirm her words, a booming voice echoed through the arena, its tone full of contempt and venom. "Delegates of the galaxy, your time has come. No more will we bow to the whims of alien races. The strong shall rule, as nature intended." Logan exchanged a brief, silent glance with Ilia. The understanding was instant, her duel with him was forgotten. They now faced a common enemy. Logan's mind shifted from strategy to survival. "We need to protect the delegates," he said urgently, scanning the arena for escape routes. Ilia nodded grimly, hefting her staff. "Agreed, but we're unarmed, save for this. How do you propose we fight an army?" Logan's lips curved into a grim smile, a spark of determination in his eyes. "The same way I beat you, with wit, diplomacy, and a little bit of luck." Without wasting another moment, they sprang into action. The arena was chaos as panicked delegates fled in all directions, trying to escape the onslaught of energy blasts. Ilia moved with purpose, using her staff to deflect incoming fire, while Logan guided terrified delegates toward the exits. The cries of people running for their lives filled the air, but Logan's mind was laser-focused on their survival. "We need to rally the security forces," Logan shouted, trying to cut through the din of the battle. "Where are they?" Ilia pointed toward a far corner of the arena. "The command center is there, but it's cut off by the attackers." Logan's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. The Crimson Dawn forces were advancing, methodically taking control of the arena. They had focused their initial attack on the main delegation areas, but Logan noticed that some of the service corridors were still relatively unguarded. The attackers' strategy seemed to be to isolate and intimidate the leaders first, rather than securing the entire complex. "I have an idea," Logan said, grabbing Ilia's arm. "Follow me." They ducked into a narrow maintenance passage, the sounds of battle muffled behind them as they ran. Logan's mind raced, formulating a plan as they sprinted through the dimly lit corridor. "We need to unite the delegates," Logan panted, his breath coming in ragged bursts. "Not just humans and Sarans, but everyone. If we can get them to work together, we might have a chance." Ilia looked at him, skepticism evident in her eyes. "And how do you propose to do that? These are proud races, many with centuries of conflict between them." Logan's expression grew serious, his resolve hardening. "By reminding them of what's at stake. This summit isn't just about trade agreements or border disputes. It's about the future of the galaxy itself." They emerged near the command center, crouching behind a fallen pillar. The area was swarming with Crimson Dawn soldiers, their red armor stark against the elegant, white stone architecture of the summit complex. The tension in the air was palpable, and Logan felt a surge of anxiety as he realized how heavily the odds were stacked against them. "We'll never get through them," Ilia whispered, her grip tightening around her staff. Logan's eyes scanned the room, every detail feeding into the calculations of his mind. Then, he spotted it, a control panel for the arena's communication system. His heart skipped a beat. They didn't need to fight their way through all of them. They just needed to get to that panel. "We don't need to," Logan said, his mind working furiously. A plan was taking shape, bold and reckless, but it was their only chance. If we can reach that panel, we can broadcast to the entire complex. Ilia followed his gaze, understanding dawning in her eyes. A bold plan, Ambassador, but how do we get there without being seen? Logan grinned, adrenaline flooding his veins. Sometimes the best way to hide is in plain sight. Before Ilia could protest, Logan stood up and walked confidently toward the control panel, adopting the stiff, purposeful gait of the Crimson Dawn soldiers. He kept his eyes forward, his movements deliberate and calm, as though he were simply another soldier in the middle of the fray. Ilia watched, her eyes wide with amazement, as Logan walked past several attackers who didn't even give him a second glance. His Earth diplomat uniform, now smeared with dirt and torn in places from their earlier duel, looked enough like battle gear to pass a cursory inspection. Logan reached the control panel, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar alien interface. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was focused, guided by the universal language of technology. After a few tense moments, a green light blinked on. Logan took a deep breath, his voice steady as he spoke into the communication system. "Delegates of the galaxy, hear me." His words reverberated through the entire complex. "I am Logan Kane of Earth. The summit is under attack, but we are not defeated. Look around you, Zenth standing alongside Vran, Saren's fighting back-to-back with humans. Our differences mean nothing in the face of this threat." As Logan spoke, Ilia emerged from hiding, using her staff to take down two Crimson Dawn soldiers who had finally realized something was amiss. She stood guard as Logan continued his impromptu speech. "We came here to build a future together," Logan said, his voice growing stronger. "And now is our chance to prove we can do it. Unite. Fight back. Show these terrorists that the galaxy stands as one." His words seemed to have an immediate effect. Across the arena, pockets of resistance began to form. Delegates from warring worlds found themselves fighting side by side, their ancient grudges forgotten as they united against a common enemy. Ilia dispatched another attacker, then turned to Logan with a mix of admiration and exasperation. "Impressive words, Ambassador, but now we need to back them up with action." Logan nodded, his eyes scanning the room. He pointed toward a weapons locker on the far side of the command center. "There. If we can arm ourselves, we might have a chance of turning the tide." With renewed determination, they fought their way across the room. Ilia's combat skills complemented Logan's unexpected talent for improvised weaponry. The odds were still stacked against them, but for the first time in hours, Logan felt the tide beginning to turn. They were no longer just diplomats, now they were warriors, and the galaxy was watching. A massive explosion rocked the complex, sending tremors through the floor. Logan staggered, grabbing onto the wall to steady himself. His heart pounded as the station seemed to shake around him. "What was that?" he shouted, his voice almost lost in the rumble of the blast. Ilia's face went pale, her eyes widening with realization as the sound of alarms blared across the complex. "The reactor core," she said, her voice strained with urgency. "They must be trying to overload it. If they succeed, this entire station will be obliterated, along with half the sector." Logan's mind raced, a sense of dread and responsibility washing over him. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. Not only did they have to stop the Crimson Dawn's attack and protect the delegates, but now, they also had to prevent a catastrophic explosion that could obliterate everything. It seemed like an impossible task, too many dangers converging at once, but Logan knew there was no time for hesitation. They had to act quickly, or they would all be lost. "We need to split up," Logan said, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. "I'll lead a team to secure the reactor. Can you coordinate the defense here?" Ilia hesitated for a split second, her eyes locking with his. In that moment, there was no longer any diplomatic distance between them, they were allies bound by a shared cause. Finally, she nodded, her expression fierce and resolute. "Consider it done." She hesitated again, but this time, her voice softened as she used his first name, something she hadn't done before. "Be careful, Logan. You've proven yourself a worthy ally today." Logan managed a grim smile, though his mind was already racing ahead to the task at hand. "You too, Ilia," he said, his voice filled with a quiet but determined resolve. "May we both live to see the peace we came here to build." With a final nod, they parted ways, each heading toward the crucial task that lay ahead of them. Logan quickly gathered a makeshift team, a burly Zenth engineer with hands the size of boulders, a lithe Vulcan scout with sharp eyes and silent steps, and a pair of human security officers who had managed to avoid capture amidst the chaos. As they moved swiftly through the winding corridors of the station, Logan couldn't help but marvel at how far his life had come in such a short time. Just this morning, he had been a simple diplomat, trying to smooth over interstellar disputes. Now, here he was, leading an alien strike team to save not just the summit but the entire galaxy. The weight of the task ahead pressed down on him, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it. The lives of so many were in their hands. The group encountered sporadic resistance as they moved toward the reactor core, but the element of surprise was on their side. The Crimson Dawn forces hadn't expected such a coordinated counterattack, and the team made good progress. As they neared the reactor chamber, the air grew thick with a pungent, acrid smell. The temperature also rose noticeably. Through the reinforced viewport, Logan could see several figures moving around the massive, pulsing energy core, attaching devices to its surface. They were trying to overload the reactor. If they succeeded, it would trigger an explosion of catastrophic proportions. "We need a plan," the Zenth engineer rumbled, his massive hands clenching and unclenching nervously. His voice carried a deep, rumbling urgency that mirrored the tension in the air. Logan studied the layout of the room, his diplomatic instincts kicking in. He had dealt with tense negotiations before, faced difficult situations that seemed insurmountable. This, however, was a different kind of negotiation, one with much higher stakes. He breathed deeply and started formulating a strategy. "Okay," he said, his voice calm despite the storm raging in his mind. "Here's what we'll do." He outlined a plan that utilized each team member's strengths. The lithe Vulcan scout would use her camouflage abilities to sneak close and gather intelligence, the human security officers would provide covering fire, and the Zenth engineer would focus on disarming the explosive devices. As Logan finished detailing the plan, he couldn't help but feel the gravity of the situation. There was no turning back now. He had to trust his team, trust in their skills and his own ability to lead them through the chaos. The sound of blaster fire echoed in the distance, reminding him that they were racing against the clock. Meanwhile, back in the main arena, Ilia had become a whirlwind of action. Her staff crackled with energy as she moved from group to group, organizing the delegates into a unified fighting force. Species that had been bitter enemies just hours ago now fought side by side, united against a common threat. It was a sight Ilia would never have imagined, yet it was happening before her eyes. As she dispatched another Crimson Dawn soldier, Ilia found herself fighting alongside a tall, insectoid being. She recognized him immediately, the Aryan ambassador. "Never thought I'd see the day when an Aryan and an Xarian fought together," the ambassador said, his mandibles clicking in what Ilia assumed was amusement. Ilia shot him a wry smile as she swung her staff, taking down another attacker. "There are many things I never thought I'd see," she replied, glancing around at the unlikely alliances forming. "Perhaps that's the point of all this, to show us what's possible when we put aside our differences." Back at the reactor core, Logan's team was putting their plan into action. The lithe Vulcan scout used her natural ability to blend into her surroundings, silently slipping through the shadows to gather critical information. The human security officers provided much-needed covering fire, using their blasters to keep the Crimson Dawn operatives at bay. Meanwhile, the Zenth engineer, whose hands were as skilled with technology as they were strong, focused on disarming the explosives that were rigged to the reactor. Logan found himself in the thick of the action, his newfound combat skills and quick thinking being put to the test as he outmaneuvered the Crimson Dawn operatives. In the chaos of battle, Logan caught sight of a familiar face across the room, the leader of the Crimson Dawn, the one who had broadcast the initial threat to the galaxy. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, Logan saw something he recognized all too well. It wasn't the cold, calculated anger of a leader bent on victory, it was fear. Not of failure or defeat, but of change. It was the same fear he had seen in the eyes of others back on Earth, the fear that drove people to cling to the familiar, even if it meant destroying the future. With a surge of strength, Logan broke free from the grip of a particularly large attacker. He knew what he had to do. "Stop," he shouted, his voice carrying across the chaotic reactor chamber. "This isn't the way." The Crimson Dawn leader sneered, his weapon still raised. But Logan could see the uncertainty flicker in his eyes. "What would you know about it, human? You're new to the galactic stage. You don't understand the long history of conflict and betrayal." Logan took a step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You're right," he said calmly. "I don't know everything about galactic history. But I do know about fear. I know how it can drive us to make choices we later regret. I've seen it in my own people's history. And I see it now in your eyes." The leader's grip tightened on his weapon, but he didn't fire. The other Crimson Dawn operatives stood still, unsure of how to proceed. Logan pressed on, his voice steady and unwavering. "This summit isn't about erasing the past or ignoring old wounds," Logan continued. "It's about choosing a different path forward, one where we work together to face the challenges that threaten us all." He gestured behind him, to his team. "Look around you. A human, a Zenth, a Vulcan, species that were once enemies, now working in harmony. We've already proven it's possible." The leader's resolve seemed to waver, his weapon lowering slightly. "And what of our grievances? Our people have suffered for generations under the current galactic order." Logan nodded, acknowledging the pain in the other's voice. "Then let your voice be heard at the negotiating table, not through violence. Be part of shaping the future, instead of trying to destroy it." For a long, tense moment, the fate of the galaxy seemed to hang in the balance. Then, slowly, the Crimson Dawn leader lowered his weapon. Perhaps you're right," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "But the past cannot be forgotten so easily." As if a spell had been broken, the other Crimson Dawn operatives began to stand down. The Zenth engineer quickly moved to disarm the remaining explosives, while the human security officers began securing the Crimson Dawn members. Logan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They had done it, they had saved the summit, and in doing so, they had possibly saved the future of galactic cooperation. As they made their way back to the main arena, Logan's mind was already racing with the implications of what had transpired. The attack, though devastating, had created an unprecedented opportunity for unity. They had done the impossible. When they emerged into the arena, the scene before them was one of controlled chaos. Delegates from various species were working together to tend to the wounded and secure the area. In the center of it all stood Ilia, her blue skin smeared with dirt and her eyes blazing with triumph. When she saw Logan, her face broke into a wide smile. "Ambassador Kane," she called out, striding toward him. Logan watched with a sense of awe as the leaders of the various delegations slowly began to approach, their towering forms a testament to the diversity of life in the galaxy. The explosion and subsequent victory had brought them all together in a way that had seemed impossible just hours ago. Now, standing in the center of the arena, they had all witnessed the unimaginable. Species that had been bitter enemies for centuries now stood side by side, united by the common cause of survival. Ilia, her expression radiating both exhaustion and triumph, turned to Logan with a smile. "I see you managed to save us all from total annihilation. Well done." Her voice was warm, but there was an edge of relief in it, too. Logan couldn't help but grin back. The weight of the day had been nearly unbearable, and yet, in this moment, the victory felt sweet. "I had some help," he said, gesturing toward his diverse team. "It seems we all work better together." Ilia's smile faltered for a brief moment before her expression grew serious. "Indeed," she said. "What happened here today, it changes everything." Before Logan could respond, the leaders of the various delegations began to speak. The Zenth Prime, a massive figure that towered above the others, his form casting a long shadow across the arena, spoke first. His voice was deep and rumbling, like a storm on the horizon, his tone measured yet tinged with wonder. "Never in 1,000 cycles did I imagine I would fight alongside a Vulcan," he said, nodding respectfully to the Vulcan matriarch, whose iridescent wings shimmered in the emergency lighting. The Vulcan matriarch inclined her head in return, her voice soft and melodic, a stark contrast to the Zenth Prime's bass tones. "Nor I with a Zenth," she replied. "Yet here we stand victorious because of our unity." Logan's heart swelled with a sense of pride, seeing these leaders acknowledge the moment they were sharing. The Aran Hive speaker, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully, was next to speak. "Perhaps it is time we reconsider the very structure of this summit," he said. "What we have witnessed today suggests that our old ways of negotiation may be insufficient." Logan felt a surge of hope at the words. This was the moment he had dreamed of when he first accepted the role of Earth's ambassador. A chance to forge a new path for galactic cooperation, one that could reshape the future of the galaxy. He stepped forward, moving into the circle of leaders, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. "If I may," he said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "What if we viewed this summit not as a series of bilateral negotiations, but as the foundation for a true galactic alliance? A forum where all voices are heard, where we pool our strengths and address our weaknesses together." His words hung in the air for a moment, and Logan held his breath, waiting for the response. Slowly, murmurs of agreement spread throughout the gathered delegates. It was working. Ilia, standing beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. Her eyes, shining with admiration and something more, something deeper, met his gaze. "A bold proposal, Ambassador Kane," she said. "But after what we've seen today, I believe it's one worth pursuing." Logan smiled at her, but the moment was fleeting. The leaders began to discuss the logistics of the new approach, their voices rising in volume as excitement and hope began to take hold. Logan's mind raced with the possibilities of what could come from this new unity. The events of the past few hours had reshaped the political landscape of the galaxy in ways he had never imagined. It was a dizzying, surreal feeling. They had accomplished something that seemed impossible, and yet, it had happened. The summit had not only been saved, it had evolved into something greater. Just as the discussions grew more animated, a low rumble echoed through the station, causing everyone to tense. The lights flickered ominously, casting erratic shadows across the arena. Logan exchanged a worried glance with Ilia. "What now?" he muttered under his breath. Before anyone could respond, a holographic projection materialized in the center of the arena. The projection was of a massive starship, its design unlike anything Logan had ever seen. It was vast, sleek, and almost alien in its symmetry, each line and curve seemed both impossible and breathtaking. The Vulcan matriarch gasped, her wings fluttering in agitation. "It can't be," the architects. A hush fell over the assembled delegates as they all watched in stunned silence. Logan leaned closer to Ilia, his curiosity piqued. "Who are the architects?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing tension in the air. Ilia's face was a mixture of awe and fear. "They're legends," she said softly, "an ancient race said to have seeded life throughout the galaxy. No one has seen them in millennia." As if in response to her words, the hologram shifted. It revealed the interior of the alien ship. Logan's breath caught in his throat. The beings that moved about were unlike anything he had ever seen, beings of pure energy, their forms constantly shifting and pulsing with iridescent light. A voice resonated through the station, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Children of the stars," the voice boomed. "We have watched and waited. Your unity in the face of adversity has proven you ready for the next step in your evolution." Logan felt a tingling sensation throughout his body. His vision blurred, and he realized that he, along with Ilia and the other leaders, was beginning to fade from view. It was as if the very air around him was slipping away. "Do not be afraid," the voice continued, now somehow louder, as though it were speaking directly to him. "You are being called to a greater purpose. The fate of not just your galaxy, but all of existence, hangs in the balance." In a flash of blinding light, Logan found himself transported. The station had disappeared, replaced by a vast chamber that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Impossible geometries twisted and bent in ways that Logan couldn't comprehend. Colors pulsed in the air around him, shifting in ways that should not have been possible. He looked around in awe, realizing that the other delegates, including the captured Crimson Dawn commander, had been transported as well. One of the energy beings approached them, its form coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape. Its voice reverberated in Logan's mind, rather than through his ears. "Welcome, chosen ones. You stand at a crossroads of cosmic significance." Logan's mind reeled. The situation was far beyond anything he could have ever expected. The being continued, its tone somber yet filled with a strange sense of urgency. "A great darkness approaches, one that threatens all life in the universe. We architects once faced this threat and merely delayed it. Now, it falls to you to find a way to defeat it once and for all." Images flashed through Logan's mind, terrifying images of entire galaxies being consumed by an incomprehensible void, civilizations crumbling, stars going dark. The scale of the threat was beyond anything he had ever imagined, and for the first time, he felt a deep, visceral fear of the unknown. He opened his mouth to speak, his voice sounding small in the vast chamber. "But why us?" The architect's form pulsed with what might have been approval. "Because you, Logan Kane of Earth, along with Ilia of Syria and the others gathered here, have demonstrated the ability to unite disparate peoples in the face of adversity. This quality will be crucial in the coming conflict." Ilia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "What would you have us do?" The architect's form expanded, enveloping them all in a soft, comforting glow. "We will teach you, train you, and prepare you for the trials ahead. You will become more than you are now, guardians of life itself." Logan's mind reeled with the implications of what the architect was saying. Just that morning, he had been a simple diplomat, tasked with bridging the gaps between disparate factions. Now, he was being called upon to help save the entire universe. He looked around at the beings who stood with him, former enemies now united by a common purpose. He met Ilia's gaze, and for the first time, he saw a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes, the same look he felt inside himself. Taking a deep breath, Logan squared his shoulders and addressed the architect. "We accept your challenge. Whatever it takes, we will face this threat together." The words, as soon as they left his mouth, felt like a pact. Almost immediately, Logan felt a surge of energy coursing through him, as if something deep within him had awakened. The chamber around them began to shift and change, transforming into what looked like a vast training ground. The architect's voice echoed one last time, before its form dissipated. "Then let your training begin. The fate of all existence now rests in your hands." As the glowing energy faded and the chamber took shape around them, Logan couldn't help but smile. Despite the overwhelming odds, he felt a deep sense of purpose and resolve. From an accidental marriage proposal to being called to save the universe in less than a day, it was going to be one hell of a story to tell, if they survived to tell it. The training began immediately, and it was intense. Each of them, Logan, Ilia, the leaders, and even the Crimson Dawn commander, was pushed to their limits, physically and mentally. But Logan was ready. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. Logan found himself grappling with concepts that defied human understanding as the training intensified. His mind expanded, stretching to comprehend new dimensions of thought that he never imagined possible. The architect's teachings transcended the boundaries of physical and mental limits, reaching into the spiritual core of his being. There were moments when it felt as though his very essence was being reshaped, as if the very foundation of his identity was being altered by the knowledge they were absorbing. It was an overwhelming process, but Logan pushed forward, each challenge met with an increasing sense of clarity. Ilia, always a steady and reliable partner, proved to be his anchor throughout this grueling process. Her combat skills, honed through years of rigorous training, complemented Logan's quick thinking and diplomatic instincts. Together, they faced down seemingly insurmountable obstacles, finding solutions to problems that would have been impossible to solve alone. The bond between them grew stronger with every challenge, but it was more than just professional, it was something deeper. They were learning to trust each other in ways that went beyond the bounds of mere alliance. Days blurred into weeks, and weeks into months. Time seemed to flow differently in the realm of the architects. It was as though the conventional laws of time had little hold here, and the days melted away in a haze of intense learning and transformation. The architects had taught them to harness energies beyond their wildest imaginations, to perceive realities that lay hidden from mortal eyes, and to communicate across vast stretches of space and time. These abilities were like nothing they had ever encountered, and yet they were forced to master them quickly. For the looming threat of the darkness was ever present. The former Crimson Dawn commander, whose name they learned was Zax, surprised them all with his dedication and tactical brilliance. His years of rebellion and insurgency had sharpened his mind in ways that proved invaluable as they strategized against the encroaching darkness. Zax's knowledge of unconventional warfare and his ability to see patterns where others saw chaos were crucial to their efforts. He was a force to be reckoned with, and despite his past, he became an indispensable part of their team. His dedication to the cause was undeniable, and slowly, the others began to see him not as an enemy, but as a vital ally in the struggle ahead. One day, after a particularly grueling session, Ilia approached Logan. Her blue skin shimmered with an inner light, a side effect of the energy they had been channeling during their training. Logan turned to her, sensing that she had something important to say. Her voice, though soft, was urgent. "Logan," she said, her eyes locking with his, "there's something I need to tell you." Logan's heart raced. The intensity in her eyes was enough to send a ripple through him, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "What is it, Ilia?" he asked, his voice steady, though he could feel the tension in the air between them. Ilia hesitated for a moment, then, with a deep breath, plunged ahead. "Do you remember the day we met? When you accidentally proposed marriage?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the words carried a weight far beyond their light-hearted origins. Logan couldn't help but chuckle, the memory feeling as though it belonged to a distant lifetime. "How could I forget?" he said, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It's not every day you nearly start an interstellar incident." Ilia's gaze softened as she met his eyes, but there was an intensity there, something deeper. "In my culture," she began, her voice filled with the weight of unspoken truths, "such a proposal, even if accidental, creates a bond. A connection that goes beyond the physical." She hesitated, her voice trembling with the sincerity of her next words. "I've felt that bond growing stronger throughout our time here." Logan's heart skipped a beat. He had felt it too, a pull toward Ilia that was impossible to ignore. It was more than just friendship, more than just an alliance forged in battle. It was something deeper, something that tied them together in a way that transcended the boundaries of their individual identities. "Ilia." Logan began, but before he could finish, alarms blared throughout the facility, cutting off his words and sending a wave of urgency through the room. The architect's voice, usually calm and measured, now boomed through the speakers, urgent and commanding. "Chosen ones," the architect intoned, its voice resonating in their minds, "the time has come. The darkness approaches faster than we anticipated. You must face it now, ready or not." In an instant, their surroundings shifted. The familiar training facility was gone, replaced by the cold, sleek bridge of a massive starship. The ship was more advanced than anything they had ever seen, its design both elegant and intimidating. Through the view screen, they saw a sight that made their blood run cold, a wave of absolute nothingness, consuming stars and planets in its wake, a cosmic force so vast and terrifying that it seemed to unravel the very fabric of the universe itself. Logan took a deep breath, his gaze shifting to his team. The Zenth Prime stood at the helm, his imposing form now able to manipulate gravity itself, his power radiating through the room. The Vulcan matriarch, her wings crackling with cosmic energy, stood by his side, her expression one of calm determination. Zax, the former Crimson Dawn leader, stood with his eyes blazing with determination, his resolve stronger than ever. And Ilia, standing tall and proud beside him, radiated a sense of strength and confidence that gave Logan a sense of comfort, even in the face of such unimaginable danger. "This is it," Logan said, his voice steady despite the fear that churned in his gut. "Everything we've trained for. We may be the last line of defense for all of existence." Ilia reached out, taking his hand in hers. The simple gesture sent a wave of warmth through him, a sense of unity and purpose that steadied his nerves. "Whatever happens, Logan," she said softly, her eyes locked on his with unwavering certainty, "I'll be here with you. We'll face this together." As the ship surged forward, moving toward the encroaching darkness, Logan allowed himself a moment of reflection. From a simple diplomatic mission to the brink of universal annihilation, it had been one hell of a journey. The battle that followed was beyond description. It transcended time and space, taking them across dimensions, through eras of existence that defied all logic. They witnessed the birth and death of galaxies, saw entire civilizations rise and fall in the blink of an eye, all while struggling against a force that sought to unravel the very fabric of reality. Logan's diplomatic skills proved to be crucial during the conflict, as he managed to unite beings from across the cosmos, bringing them together in the fight against the void. But it was Ilia's warrior spirit that drove them forward when all seemed lost, her unrelenting will pushing them to keep fighting when everything else seemed hopeless. Each member of their team played a vital role in the battle. The Zenth Prime's control over gravity, the Matriarch's mastery of cosmic energy, Zack's tactical genius, they were all indispensable in the final confrontation. In the final, desperate moments, as they stood at the very edge of existence, Logan realized the true power they had been gifted. It wasn't just about fighting or cosmic abilities, it was about connection. The bonds between them, the unity they had forged with countless civilizations during their journey, became their greatest strength. In that moment of perfect unity, Logan reached out, not with his hand, but with his very essence. He felt Ilia's presence, then the others, and finally, countless beings across the universe. Together, in that single, fleeting moment, they pushed back against the darkness. A blinding flash of light engulfed everything, and for an eternal instant, Logan felt as if he were everywhere and nowhere at once. His consciousness expanded beyond the limits of his physical form, and he could sense the very fabric of reality itself trembling, on the brink of collapse and renewal. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Logan found himself back on the bridge of the starship, gasping for breath. Around him, his teammates were in similar states of disorientation, their bodies exhausted from the strain of the battle. Through the view screen, Logan saw the universe spread out before them, whole, unbroken, and teeming with life. Did we do it?" Zax asked, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. The architect's voice resonated through the ship, filled with a warmth they had never heard before. "You have succeeded beyond our wildest hopes. The darkness has been pushed back, not just defeated, but transformed. You have ushered in a new era of cosmic harmony." His stomach churned with embarrassment, and for a moment, he wondered if the entire diplomatic mission was doomed. But then, Ilia raised her voice, commanding the attention of the room. "Silence," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise with authority. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to her. Ambassador Kane, Ilia addressed Logan formally, her tone still calm but now carrying a note of respect. While your actions were misguided, I believe they were born of genuine respect. However, such a gesture cannot go unanswered. Our traditions demand a response. Logan swallowed hard, bracing himself for whatever came next. I understand, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. What would you have me do? Ilia's eyes glinted with a mixture of challenge and curiosity. Our ways are not soft, Ambassador. To prove your resolve and honor both our peoples, I propose a trial by combat, a traditional Sarion duel. A fresh wave of murmurs swept through the assembly. Logan's mind reeled at the idea of a duel. He was a diplomat, not a warrior. But as he looked around at the expectant faces of the Earth delegation, he realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about him anymore, the fate of Earth's diplomatic mission hung in the balance. His pride and honor, as well as Earth's standing in the galaxy, were on the line. Drawing himself up to his full height, Logan met Ilia's gaze. I accept your challenge, he declared, his voice ringing out across the hall with a newfound sense of resolve. A ripple of approval passed through the Sarion contingent, and Ilia nodded, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. Very well. We shall duel at dawn, before the assembled representatives of the galaxy. Prepare yourself, Ambassador Kane. You'll need more than words to survive what's coming. Logan's heart raced as he realized the enormity of what lay ahead. The next chapter of this adventure was only just beginning,